Like the enduring hero of all time.
Brad, great to see you again. Thank you for doing this. I was struck even before I got to the meat of the book by something you wrote in your acknowledgments, which actually really surprised me. You say you convince yourself that you're telling the story of imaginary people, but the only story you say I can really be honest about is my own story. What did you mean by that?
You know, I think all these years, you know, as writers, we try to impress people. You know, I'm going to tell the tale of my character. And, you know, we think we're putting all these great ideas and all this imagination out there. And when my first book came out, you get your reviews. Second one comes out, you get your reviews. When the third one comes out, people now read it and they kind of figure you out. And internet had just started. A guy writes to me, I don't know this guy at all, and he said, I read your 3 books. What are your issues with your father? And none of the books I'd written at that point had a father in them. They were on like couple pages. I'd have a father for 10 pages here, 20 pages here. And this guy nailed it, nailed me. And I realized, you know what? I keep thinking that I'm telling the story, but it's just my story. It's just whatever I'm working out in my life.
So when you get that email, are you happy or are you kind of jolted or both?
I think, well, first of all, you're kind of undone by someone's immediate
Seeing
intimacy.
through you.
Right. You feel like I've got this shield and I can be protected. And especially, and you know this, in the beginning of your career, you never want to say anything bad, right? Any interview I do, I sound like a rookie baseball player, right? I'm just happy to be here. I'm just hoping for the best.
That scene from Bull Durham.
Right. That scene from Bull Durham. I'm giving the baseball quotes. And then eventually you say, you know what? I'd rather be honest. I had a crappy week last week. My mom died. My dad passed away. It's okay to put your stuff out there. If you're going to be out there honestly.
But you put it out there in a pretty fantastic
Yeah, well, right, but it's the only way I know how to tell the story. In a strange way, you know, I remember when my mom had breast cancer, and I got to the end of the book. I didn't know she was going to die. She had been diagnosed, and I write this entire book. This is called The Book of Lies. And when I finished the book, the first draft, I'm kind of reading it, through it, and my mom is now on her deathbed in the other room, because it takes me 2 years to write a book. And I'm reading the book and I'm going, wait, this is a book about a boy who's trying to deal with the death of his mother. How did I not even see that? I mean, in the first scene, you find out his mom died, and then the whole book, he's struggling with that. And I'm like, this is me right here, right now. I just don't even realize.
You have a powerful unconscious.
I have a clearly, I'm absolutely not in control of my unconscious. I mean, it's just, it rules me. And every time I get to the end of the book, I'm like, what's going on in my life now that I need to tell this story? And to me, that's the best story you can tell is your own.
You wrap it all around the third novel, your 10th overall, of The Culprit Ring. Tell us what The Culprit Ring is.
So a couple years ago, I got a call from the Department of Homeland Security asking me to come in and brainstorm different ways that terrorists could attack the United States. And my first thought was, if they're calling me, George, we got bigger problems than anybody thinks, right? I mean, this is a disaster. But I was honored to be part of what they call
I'll bet you were.
I mean, honored. Red Cell program, fly me to D.C., go through it, and I stick with them. They keep sending me scenarios, pair me with a Secret Service agent, and we're running real scenarios on major cities and destroying them in no time. It was right after 9/11. And so, you know, I'm just honored to be there, but I can't figure out why me. Why'd they pick an ordinary person like me when they can have anybody? And I trace it back through history to a guy named George Washington. And George Washington had his own secret spy ring made up of regular, ordinary citizens, the Culprit Ring. And you know, he said, I want to pick regular people, not my military guys, because no one looks twice at an ordinary person. And I love that. And I said to my guy in Homeland Security, wouldn't it be cool if in my next novel you find out George Washington's spy ring still exists? And he said to me, what makes you think it doesn't? And then you go, you know what, I got an idea for a book.
I like to think I know a lot about modern presidents. But then I read this and I just can't believe it. Ronald Reagan carried a gun in the White House?
That was a good one, right? I mean, so I'm in with the Secret Service, and I'm on a tour of Secret Service headquarters. And they've helped me with about 6 books now. And we're walking through, and I don't know if you've ever been to headquarters, but they have this little kind of, they have their own archivist and their own little museum in the back. And they have the door from the car that Reagan was shot at. And they keep the door. I mean, just a twisted kind of memory keepsake. And I'm talking to them, and they go, you want a good one that no one, because they always know I want something that no one knows. And 2 of them tell me separately, Ronald Reagan, while president, carried a gun with him. He carried it.
This is after the shooting?
This is, you know what, I should know whether it's before or after. It must have been after,
Must
just
have been
because
after
it was so early. Right, it was so early. hid it in a briefcase, carried it on Air Force One, and my mouth is open.
I'm surprised that's even allowed.
How do you allow it, right? I mean, but I guess I'm like, who's he going to hurt but himself,
They're
right?
not
I mean,
even
like,
allowed to drive a car.
They can't, right? They can't drive, they can't do anything, but he could have a gun. And I said, but I became obsessed immediately with this story because I was like, okay, now what does every other president have? So I immediately go to Bush 41, who's helped me with a number of books now.
You guys have a real friendship.
We do. I'm actually, he's funny. You know, the first time I met him, he spent the first half hour we were there trying to convince my wife that he invented the phrase "you to man." That's a good joke. That's a funny joke. My wife's like, "Do you know President Bush invented you to man?" I'm like, "No, he didn't. He's lying to you." But that's a good joke. But Senior is just a really great guy, and he likes my books. He wrote me a fan letter years ago, and when I need help, he'll just help and answer these obscure questions. So I go to him and I say, "I heard the story about Reagan." In all these years, I've always asked him the questions. And it was the first time, like you, where he was like, I didn't know that about Reagan.
That's unbelievable.
And he
was the vice president.
He's the vice president, and it's his friend now at this point. And he's like, tell me who you got that from. I want to know that story. And so now of course, I'm like, oh, well, what did you have in your pockets? And it's interesting because I went through, and you can see, and maybe you saw the Clinton one, but so Bush 41 used to carry just his driver's license. That was it, nothing else. They all have, of course, the nuclear codes. Right, and I was like, why? You can't drive. But he carried that. Then Clinton used to carry just a clip that had his money, had his credit card.
Yeah, he always had money. I remember.
And he had a picture of Chelsea, picture of Hillary, and a prayer, which I just think is interesting.
Oh, I didn't know about the prayer.
He had a prayer card, and then W carried sometimes just a Sharpie, and the only thing he carried was he had a New York Police Department's badge from one of the first responders. Whose family member gave him the badge after 9/11 and said, this belongs to my family member, and he carried it his entire presidency.
You know, all these relationships you have, all this research you do helps you do what you call is your job. I love this description you have. My job as a novelist is to beat the news. How do you beat the news?
Well, listen, if I want to do what you do and put it in a book, I look like I'm chasing you. So I can't do a book on, right now I would never, let's just think of a topic that's big right now.
NSA spying.
Right, NSA spying. It's just like, that's been done. I see it in the news every day, so why do I want to buy a book or read a story when I can get it free on the internet and see it right on a website? So what I always say to my sources is I'm like, tell me what we're not worried about now, but we're going to be worried about. Mm-hmm. And that's always where the best stories come from. So I have to be ahead of where that news is. Eventually I'll get passed by it. I always do. But I remember when I did a book called The Millionaires, they said, I said, can you do virtual counterfeiting, where you take a computer and truly create the numbers? I did this 10 years ago, actually 15 years ago. And I remember the head of FinCEN at the time said to me, you are onto something. This doesn't exist, but it will. And when we did that story and it all started breaking, it was great for us. It helps with book sales, but I can't compete with the front page of a newspaper.
No, you got to be ahead, because you just said it takes you 2 years to write a book. So take us through the process. What's the beginning, the middle, and the end?
Yeah, so for me, it's always a little bit character and a little bit plot. With this one in particular, I don't know where it came. Usually I can pinpoint the moment, and I don't even know where it was. But I just woke up and knew I had this image of the First Lady, and I had met Barbara Bush a number of times, met Laura Bush, and the one thing I always took away is their lives are just not their own. They're just followed by everyone. The sun shines so bright in their face all the time by every camera, and that moment of just quiet is so vital. And I had this image of a First Lady who's in the rose garden. She puts her hands in the dirt. It's 5 o'clock in the morning. No one knows she loves to garden. It's her one secret she keeps for herself. And her hands go in the dirt, and she smells the mulch, and she feels something. And what she pulls out of the dirt of the rose garden is a severed arm.
She pulls the arm, but that's arms what brings you into the story.
Right, and that's it. And that's truly the metaphors right there, right? I mean, she has no idea how it got there. She has no idea who got past security, and she certainly doesn't know the puzzle that's hidden in the closed fist of that arm. But I was like, that's a mystery I want to solve. I want to know how that happened.
You've talked about the influence writers like Judy Blume have had on you. For everyone who looks up to you, what's the one thing you've learned that everyone who wants to be a writer should know?
In a strange way, just exactly what we said, which it's hard. And it's okay to be hard, but don't stop doing it. I mean, I got on my first novel, I got 24 rejection letters. There were only 20 publishers at the time. I got 24 rejection letters, right? I mean, George, that means some people are writing me twice to make sure I get the point. But I said, if they don't like that book, I'm going to write another. And if they don't like that, I'm going to write another. And when I look back on the experience, I don't look back and say, well, I was right and they were wrong and ha-ha on them. I look back and just say, you know what, life's subjective. And all you got to do when you write your book is find one person to say yes. That's it. It takes one person and you're a published author. You are all too human, right? You got one editor says, George, you're now a published writer. And that's the way it is, and you just got to find that one person. So to me, find that person, don't let anyone tell you no, and keep going and keep going and keep going.
And that is exactly what you do. Brad, thanks a lot.
Always good to see you.